But I'll start with some questions here with the panel. And one short issue, quick answers, but all of the three clusters here are from manufacturing. Now, manufacturing has become sexy again. You know, people said, no, we moved on to a different type of economy. But is that notion of manufacturing still relevant? How much is really services in your activities, Tom?
Sure. Well, we were, as we established our cluster organization, we were very much influenced by, Michael Porter's thought, his definition of a cluster, which includes not only the manufacturers or the primary members of our organization, but the industries that are related to them. And when I say industries, I mean service suppliers as well as manufacturing inputs. What we found over the years is in Massachusetts that manufacturing, while there's still manufacturing going on in the medical device space in the state, the focus is now more on R&D. And we're losing manufacturing jobs in this particular industry. However, at the same time, companies are really beefing up their R&D expertise and their capabilities, taking advantage of the academic institutions and the teaching hospitals that are in the state and the region. So, so we find, for instance, we're getting more members in the product development area, organizations such as Cambridge Consultants and Design Continuum, and so, R&D outsourced contracting organizations. So, we're making that shift ourselves.
So manufacturing is working in the political arena, but the reality is often got much more nuanced, it seems. Bob, what's your observation from optics?
Yeah, I'm more knowledge-based myself, but that $2.3 billion is mostly manufacturing, and so optics is healthy in that particular domain. We've lost the optical disc technology over to the Chinese and stuff like that, but we run fast and change direction, and so the optics, we need all the techie people, not just we're just not optics. We need fine mechanics, fine electronics, and all these other technologies, marketing, sales. We have a wonderful business school in Tucson. Bringing those in together. When I say everybody, I mean everybody. So even though I'm a knowledge base and 72% of my revenue comes from overseas, the reality is that we're mostly manufacturing, and we're into automobiles, headlights, taillights, medical instruments, vast area. Optics into so many areas. And we can do better. And the rest of the world is playing catch-up, which is not bad for you. It makes me more competitive and keeps my prices down.
Right. Interesting. I think one of the issues is, of course, also, where are the jobs and where's the value where's the value added? Is that actually with the manufacturing activity or with the services? Rebecca, what's the situation? I mean, Ohio is known for manufacturing. Yeah. Has that been changing? What is the picture in your...
No, I don't think it's changing. I mean, manufacturing is alive and well in a lot of ways. Obviously, I think there's a changing face of manufacturing and how we're adopting and sort of integrating the idea of the U.S. capabilities in entrepreneurship, in IT, in all of these different areas. Really, the U.S. has been great around change, and somehow the manufacturing community is lagging in that. And so I think the integration of these trends, software, additive, is a great opportunity to be able to move in a way that the U.S. can actually capture a space where Asia is not going to be able to do that integration. And it's one other quick thing that I've been in two conversations in the last week, one with the CEO of Siemens US and one with Rockwell Automation, and basically they're talking software engineers. I mean, that's kind of, earlier they mentioned computer science, but I think that software capability and that idea is one big place where we're moving.
And that's embedded software a lot of times.
Yep.
That's stuff that we can have an advantage on.
Exactly.
So I think that's, it seems, there's clear realization in the market that that's the way it is. I think we sometimes have to be careful that the politicians don't get the wrong idea if they talk about what the manufacturing strategy is. But Rebecca, I want to pick up on what you just said. You talked about two large companies and what they did. You also talked about smaller companies in your clusters. How is that relation working out? That we sometimes have this view that clusters are this happy family, and everybody's collaborating all all the time. Is that the reality? Where are the kind of break points in that relationship?
I think that, in the beginning, it was an even bigger challenge. Like when we were bringing, cluster members to larger companies, for instance, it was always pushing, so it's always selling, pushing, us working as an intermediary basically between, to broker language and really in the cluster too, same thing, between small companies, it was us constantly really having to be in the middle of the activity. And now we're starting to see that shift in the sense of a couple ways. One is the cluster members are working together, calling each other, they know each other, and so they see the opportunities themselves. We still offer some broader opportunities that they may not see, but they're starting to see them themselves. The other thing that's interesting is the larger companies are starting to pull us into conversations that are critical to them because we're a trusted advisor. So whether it's those conversations I was talking about on workforce, particularly with Rockwell because they're in our region, or there's another large company that said, we want to create a prototyping capability in the U.S. Can you help us in Northeast Ohio in particular, can you help us figure that out? And so they're starting to direct our activities, which is obviously a good sign. But I think we don't see as much. People say, well, competitors working together. I mean, we just don't see as much of that. I think that the larger companies that are in deep competition are much more intense than the small to mediums who are just striving for market share, and they see such huge markets. They're like, okay, if there's 3 companies in the cluster and we're all working towards the same market, who cares? It's more in the established companies where you see those challenges.
Right. Great. I mean, very interesting on these dynamics between the companies of different size. Bob, you wanted to get in on that?
Yeah, I wanted a piece of this. In Tucson, we had Raytheon and SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Contracts, that we were servicing those. And so I developed a plan with Raytheon. They came under the director of the CEO of Raytheon, and 5 of them there, one of the managers, we don't need the optics cluster, blah, 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 blah. But when I started saying, what I wanted Raytheon to do is go through the SBIRs and say which ones they could use. Raytheon does no research and development. They're just an assembler. They assemble all these $1 billion worth of missiles. And so they did that. And then when we find a cluster member who wants to do something in that area, Raytheon signs on as a phase 3 buyer. Right. All of a sudden, we soared in the nation for this. John Wozniak from Raytheon won a national award, 2 of them, one from Raytheon, one from the government, and I won a Raytheon award, national award for Small Business SBIR. So they benefit. Same thing with NIST in physics. Kathleen, the director, I said, your equipment is aging. What you want to do this? And, and the deliverable that I manufacture becomes NIST. Oh, no, that's not legal. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. And they stopped the meeting, came in, the people said they didn't know. The next morning they came back and said, Bob's right. And so, and the people in Washington love the program because now these small business innovative research are to create businesses and create markets. And so now it's a national policy, and it works. And Contravis up in South Carolina or North Carolina area, the guy was just taking random notes, and then all of a sudden his eyes come up and wait a minute, oh yeah. 2 days later he was making my presentation at Duke for me. So it is for the small business and the big business. Right. And the big business is, quite bluntly, if we have a real successful R&D, they eat us up. We're the guppy. Right. Okay? And then they take all the people, hey, I make millions and millions of dollars. I'm not going to cry.
Right. That's always good. So I think we'll get back to that when we talk about federal policies, how they might need to be adjusted to this reality that you are describing. Now, I have to make a compliment to the audience because these are all excellent questions. The problem is,
can't read them.
Can we do them? No. I can read them. I can try, but can we do them in time? And here there are even more coming. But I want to at least try to get to 1 or 2 before we talk to policy implications. And one a question that we'll start with Tom. How do you get and sustain the support of cluster members to the cluster commons. Because, it's easy if you're selling a direct service to them, but a lot of what you do is providing a broad platform. How do you make sure that people kind of pitch in and do support them?
Yeah, I think then you really have to look at the way you have your cluster members participate, and you have to have them draw them in on agenda setting and program development and project development wherever you can. I have a very active board of directors that represents, I think, a nice display or a nice range of companies within our cluster. They're inputting, and then we make it very easy for people to get in touch with us and to respond to. So, again, we're just that much closer to our industry because we're specifically focused, like Bob's organization, on one industry. It makes our job a little bit easier.
Can I mention, because I think this is kind of going to be controversial, at least with my colleagues, is we don't take any money from our cluster members right now, so we're fully grant funded by philanthropy, by business. We have corporate support, but it's through the chambers. It's not through cluster members. So we're going to start changing that because I think there's pieces of the model, and I think this is one of the differences with the emerging, areas is the value was not clear to people until, the last couple of years then when we started to work. And so we've gotten money now from Eaton, and we're starting to really hit the larger corporations. But you're right, it is kind of, we don't want to move to a model where the members are dictating our work because we're economic development. We're a C3 organization. We're meeting a market gap. We're asking them to do things like connected, disconnected populations to help the core cities rise. Like we're really holding our cluster members accountable for things like that as well. And so, there's this very fine line when they start to fund you in that mission around how you balance that input. But service providers, large companies, people benefit. We just did what you said, which is listed out all the beneficiaries. What's the value and how could they pay for it, right? And then you start asking.
Right. Very interesting. A more complex question with no black and white, how you do this. Just, we did this year for the second time a global survey of cluster initiatives called the Green Book. First one was 2003. And in the first one, we saw that over time, public funding went down, or, non-member funding went down. Yeah. Now, when we looked at this year, it actually turned out that it was quite stable. Now, this might be because it's mainly European efforts, but we did see that about 2/3 of the financing has come from different public sector sources. So those change over time. But so this issue of how to sustain effort continues to be very much on the map. Bob, any views?
No, go on the next question.
On those issues. Great. So let me just... Another question to Tom. So Bob talked about the relationship between clusters in different locations. How do you connect Mathematic with clusters in other parts of the world? Maybe later on, Rebecca as well. What's the role of these international or other cluster locations?
Sure. Well, we work very closely with our national association, the Advanced Medical Technology Association, and they have established a State Medical Technology Association group that meets on a monthly basis by conference call. We see each other at a lot of conferences and on Capitol Hill in Washington. So there's a very natural interaction. I mentioned on an international level, that I do go to this Medica show every year. Huge German trade fair type of operation, 250,000 visitors, 3,500 exhibitors, 21 exhibit halls. Just huge. And you have to be there if you're in this industry each November. And through that, over the years, we've developed lots of relationships with groups in Barcelona, the UK, France, Belgium, mostly Western European, but also through Japan, Malaysia, and Australia. So we've really got to establish ourselves. Also, without boasting too much, but Boston, Massachusetts, known as a medical center. People will look at Boston, look at what's happening in Massachusetts in this particular industry. So we get a lot of foreign delegations. My inbox and my email right now has requests from from South Korea, Israel, and India, bringing delegations here before the end of the year. So.
And sometimes I contribute to that,
bringing
people from crazy places that want to learn from
mathematics. All right.
So, Rebecca, what's the...
I was just going to say, I've been historically mostly national, connecting through SSTI, and then the Small Business Administration has funded a set of clusters that we're a part of, and so we share best practices. That being said, we have delegations come through Cleveland as well. I actually have Singapore in my inbox right now, but I don't have as many as you do, I'm sure. But, we do connect through that, and the guy who runs our flexible electronics work has been to Itri over in Taiwan because it's a major cluster. I would say we're very light, though, on our international sort of best practice sharing and work. It just becomes a challenge of focus, I think, and time. But, it's obviously something we've talked about that I want to get more engaged in.
We did. This actually connects with one question by a Red Sox fan in the audience, which is always good. What's the role of culture in the different regions? How much is what you do shaped by where you are?
Huge.
Want to start off, Rebecca, and then we'll...
Yeah, I would say, for us, it's, it's huge. We just went through a strategic planning process. I'm presenting to my board next week the final work, and our critical piece is that there's not enough innovation capacity in our companies and our institutions. It's just not in the culture of Northeast Ohio. It's changing, but we need to get more in order to unlock any kind of exponential, job growth and market increases. And so, I've worked in Pennsylvania, New York City, Colorado, here. Culture plays a deep role in so many things, how you do your business, how you dress for your business. Right. The whole thing. So it's an interesting aspect.
Bob, Arizona.
They either love us or hate us. There's legislation right now, education, and the cluster years ago forced through a citizen initiative, and I had 3 senators tell me, dead on arrival, and we passed it by 2%. That we changed the state constitution, and in this recession, they tried to rescind it, and the Supreme Court just ruled that they have to pay that money 3 years back to the education system. On the other side of it, the education system loves us. They can't fight for themselves by law. And so to have people in the, all the different cluster industry go to the legislatures and say, thou shalt. The thing we passed initially, we tax ourselves 1/8% on sales tax. And the state legislature's mad that they're the ones who write the laws. Well, if it doesn't work for us, if it's broke, we're going to fix it. And we have enough of votes. When I swing 25,000 votes in one direction, it's harder than the devil for them. On the other end, the mayor of the Tucson and Phoenix, they love us because we champion job creation.
I'm just waiting for you to go into politics.
I've been asked governor, mayor, national senator. No.
Now, Tom, there's actually a book, one of the most read books in cluster research that argues that our region, or I say our region, Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts, failed because we have no culture of collaboration. Is that true?
Well, that book is now about 25 years old, and its author has sort of said things have really changed. Christian is referring to a book that was written by a Berkeley PhD, her dissertation, I believe, comparing the collaborative spirit of Silicon Valley with that of the Route 128 area loop around Boston. We often compare ourselves to that region because there's a big medtech cluster there. There's a lot of venture money there. There's a long tradition of collaboration and information sharing and all that. I have to say that when I took this job early on, 18 years ago, Yankee individualism was alive and well. But I think the entrepreneurial sense of interaction and collaboration and partnership has really taken hold in the Boston area, and I think it's a much different place than when, was it Mary? I forget her name. Annalise Saxenian wrote the book. Yeah. much different place now. Much different.
It's all because the Red Sox are now winning. So that makes a big difference to the culture of the place.
Can I make a quick comment on that? So I was out at Stanford last week speaking at the focused on HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities and innovation Stanford was hosting. And so to a T, everybody, I had lunch with David Morgenthaler, we had Andreessen Horowitz speak to us, Facebook, Google, and to a T it talked about, the collaborative nature of competitors, getting together for a drink after work, helping to solve each other's problems, not thinking of things as so, insular, venture capital, you argue on a deal this time, you have to do a deal together next time. And I think that when I talk about innovation capacity too, it is the adoption of, collaborative models of diversity into, whether it's diversity of thought, diversity of how you look. I mean, those things have to be in place, and your belief system has to be around that for a thriving, innovation environment. And so those are,
So it's encouraging to hear that culture can also change. I think a lot of us realize how important it is, but Massachusetts maybe on an interesting track there. Now, let's get to the final round. Difficult question. What is your wish list, if you will, for the federal government? We'll end the day today with a session that basically looks at some of these new programs. Is there anything beyond getting out of the way that you would like the federal government to do? We'll start with Tom, Bob, and Rebecca, too.
So, my sense is that where the feds can really help and that would be in concentrating their efforts and their resources and finances, if you will, to areas that have, how do I describe this? We didn't invent the MedTech cluster. MassMedic didn't, or establish it in Massachusetts. It was there. It was growing. We work now to make it grow further and expand further. I would recommend that the federal government, in looking at its economic development policies as they relate to clusters, not to try to support efforts to establish a cluster in an area where there's no basis for it. I think of the great allure of biotechnology and how every single state in the union is trying to get a piece of that action. Well, it may not make sense for a lot of states to fully pursue it, but they may have a tremendous agricultural science cluster that they could develop and really build into a world class. Focus on what you build on strength. Build on strength.
Like MassMedic did it.
That's correct.
In the past.
That's correct.
Great point, Bob. What's your view?
One of the big things, I go every year to Congressional Visit Day in Washington, 400 or so companies, engineers, and we storm the Potomac. And one of the things I stand toe-to-toe with the legislatures, we don't have any money. Good. You want to make money without costing any money, lower the trade barriers. And I told you, the E-Track about 2 months ago created the first final revision of our export trade laws, and many tens of thousands of items went from the military control list to the commodity control list, which is a lot easier to deal with. That's good. So the President, the Department of Commerce, Hillary Clinton, the Department of Defense, Page, all of these people, Gage, all of them are behind it. That's good. The other one I've championed against since the day it was formed is leave no child behind. The government stay out of telling people what to do and how to educate. Every region, like a cluster, is every region, fund it. We need the education. We need the creativeness, and we need the change in the education. But the local people do that.
So let the feds kind of make sure that the broader environment that you describe is
healthy,
but get out of the kind of two local issues. Rebecca, what's your view?
I would say there's three things really. I guess I would highlight basic research funding. Critical to continue and hopefully scale basic research funding. The idea that the SBIR, that type of funding, being a partner in that. And I guess I had a fourth, the breaking down regulatory barriers, so being very clear about how you can, obviously be, especially in the environmental realm, but be responsible, but also break down those barriers and streamline. And then the last one is the advocacy work we're doing at SSTI, which is I think this administration with the Jobs and Innovation Accelerators, the SBA, the manufacturing institutes, has recognized there's a role for intermediaries to play in a cluster experience, and that there's a role for them to play in helping to sustain those organizations. And so we're advocating for, continuing that funding in Congress, so Congress understanding the value and continuing beyond this administration.
Excellent. Thank you three very, very much. Very concrete ideas. I think this was excellent discussion. A lot of points to follow up on. I do apologize to the audience that I didn't get through all of the questions, but the speakers will be there. Rebecca, there was a question about the roadmap, so you can follow up and explain more. Thank you for now, and I'll see you back in hopefully a couple of minutes for our next round. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.